Learning outcomes. After studying this module, you shall be able to know the difference between long run and short run Phillips curve, learn how expectations affect the Phillips curve, understand why money is neutral, learn about the quantity theory of money, know how budget deficit causes inflation, how the objective of price stability can be achieved. Introduction. In this unit, we carry forward our discussion on Phillips curve of the previous unit. So far, we know that the Phillips curve essentially represents a stable trade-off in the short run when price expectations remain unchanged. We found that two missing links, the markup rate and the role of expected inflation, caused the breakdown of the short run Phillips curve in 1970s when inflation became high and persistent. In this unit, we learn about how the original Phillips curve was modified to introduce the role of expectations. We also learn about the monetary perspective that inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon and how it can be controlled by the central bank. Phillips curve in the long run. Expectation augmented Phillips curve. Friedman and other monetarists believed that output and employment diverge from their natural rate temporarily but eventually return to these rates. The distinctive aspect in Friedman's analysis is his long run view of monetary policy. Here the notion of natural rate becomes important. We can write the Phillips curve equation as follows. Pi t is equals to pi t to the power e minus alpha into ut minus un, where actual inflation given by pi t now depends on the expected inflation given as pi t to the power e and deviation of unemployment given as ut from the natural rate un. The equation shows that when actual inflation is equals to the expected inflation, unemployment is at the long run equilibrium. Further, there is a one-on-one relationship between expected inflation and actual inflation, implying that at a given unemployment rate, an increase in expected inflation will increase the actual inflation by the same amount. This is represented in figure 1 as long run Phillips curve. In figure 1 above, the short run Phillips curve are depicted as PC1, PC2 and PC3 respectively. On any given PC, the expected inflation is constant. For example, PC1 is drawn with expected inflation of pi 1 to the power e. At point A, when actual inflation is pi 1 equals expected inflation, that is pi 1 to the power e, unemployment is at the natural rate, that is at un. Suppose there is a growth in the nominal money supply which takes the economy to a short run equilibrium point B, resulting in lowering the unemployment rate to u1 and increasing the inflation rate to pi 2. Now this deviation arises because in the short run, product prices increase faster than the factor prices, the crucial factor price being the money wage. Workers are unable to evaluate that prices in the economy have risen. They consider that only wages have risen and supply more labor, failing to understand that prices have risen faster than the wages. As the real wage, that is W by P, falls, firms demand more labor, which increases employment and output. Thus, in the short run, labor supply increases because the expected real wage is higher as a result of the higher nominal wage and unchanged view about the behavior of prices and labor demand increases because of a fall in the actual real wage paid by the employer. Consequently, the unemployment rate falls below the long run equilibrium rate. The above situation is only temporary as workers eventually observe the higher price level and demand higher nominal wages, which cause employment to return at the natural rate. This has implication for the Phillips curve. As workers anticipate that prices are rising and demand higher increase in their money wages, the Phillips curve will shift upward to the right to PC2, reflecting a higher rate of expected inflation at pi 2 to the power e and return to the natural rate of unemployment depicted by the movement from B to C. Any given rate of unemployment now corresponds to a higher rate of inflation as expectations have been revised to a new level. A policy maker who wants to reduce the level of unemployment further may continue to increase the rate of growth of nominal money supply, but eventually the economy will return to the long run equilibrium when expectations of inflation falls in line with actual inflation as workers come to anticipate the higher inflation that corresponds to the higher growth in the nominal money supply. When actual inflation equals expected inflation, that is, change in inflation is zero, it indicates price stability, and the unemployment consistent with this is called the non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment, known as NIRU. This is usually equated with the natural rate of unemployment. The long run Phillips curve is a vertical line connecting all the points where expected inflation equals actual inflation and unemployment is at the long run equilibrium. This analysis shows that interventionist policy causes only temporary gains in output and a permanent increase in inflation because in the long run, any attempt to keep unemployment below the NIRU will cause inflation to accelerate without affecting the output. Friedman's theory of the natural rate of output and unemployment is the theoretical foundations for the monetarist belief that in the long run, expansionary policies such as an increase in nominal money supply affects only prices and other nominal variables. Real variables such as employment and output are affected by the real variables such as factor supplies like capital and labor and technology. Neutrality of money. The fact that in the long run, money supply affects only the price level and not the output shows that money is neutral in the long run. In the figure 2 below, suppose initially the economy is at the long run equilibrium where AD0 and AS0 intersect. The AS curve is drawn for a given level of expected price P to the power E. The policy maker decides to increase the nominal money supply, which causes a shift in the AD curve from AD0 to AD1. In the short run, the equilibrium moves from E0 to E1 and output increases from Y0 to Y1 and price level increases from P0 to P1. This deviation in output is achieved because product prices rise faster than the factor prices and workers supply more labor as they mistakenly believe that their real wage has increased. But once they realize that prices have increased, they revise their expectation of the price level and demand higher wages. This causes an upward shift in the AS curve. As wages increase, prices increase as the prices are based on the factor cost, that is wages, and the economy moves to E2. Thus, in the long run, only the price level increases from P0 to P2 with output remaining constant at the natural rate. The premise that money affects only nominal variables such as prices while leaving the real variables such as output unaffected is known as classical dichotomy. Classical economists believed that the real and nominal variables can be analyzed separately. Here, however, the dichotomy is valid only in the long run. In other words, money is neutral in the long run, whereas in the short run, it does change output, the real output. Quantity theory of money. Quantity theory of money. In the classical theory, the quantity of money determines the level of aggregate demand, which in turn determines the price level. In other words, the value of P, the general price level, and its movement over time are determined by the demand and supply of money balances in the economy. It is also viewed as a monetary approach according to which inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon, because an increase in general prices caused by demand related factors arises because of the monetary expansion. The supply of money, that is m to the power s, is treated to be exogenously given by the central bank. The demand for money, represented by m to the power d, is given by transaction motive. There is no role of interest rate in determining the money demand. Thus, people hold a constant fraction, that is k, of their money income, that is py, in the form of money balances. So, the equation depicting the demand for money can be expressed as m to the power d is equals to k into py. In equilibrium, money supply equals money demand, which can be expressed as m to the power s is equals to m to the power d, or m to the power s is equals to k into py. If there is full wage price flexibility, so that output is assumed to be at the level of full employment, then y can be replaced by yf. Also, assume that 1 by k is the velocity of money given by capital V, which is determined by the payment habits of the people and other institutional factors and are treated as given. With these assumptions, we can write the above equations as the expression for the general price level. That is, m to the power s is equals to 1 by V into PYF, or P is equals to m to the power s into V by YF. With V and YF constant, an increase in m to the power s leads to an equiproportionate increase in the general price level in the economy. The value of real income and other real variables will remain unchanged. Thus, the theory also proposes neutrality of money. Since price level is proportional to money supply, the rate of inflation equals the rate of growth of money supply. Thus, inflation is purely a monetary phenomenon which can be controlled if the central bank restrained money supply. The assumption here is that if people hold more money in their hand than what they wish to hold, they will spend it directly on purchasing goods and services. With supply fixed, too much money chases too few goods, which drive up prices. In contrast, Keynesian proposes that when people have too much money in their hand than what they want to hold, they purchase bond, which drives the interest rate down and bond prices up. Low interest rate stimulates investment, which increases the output if the economy is operating below full employment. Thus, generally, money is not neutral in the Keynesian system. The proposition that a doubling of money supply will lead to a doubling of the price level holds even when the economy is not at full employment, but output is fixed due to reasons such as fixed supply of resources or unchanging production technology. Since these are fixed in the short run, The quantity theory holds in the short run. Next is the modern quantity theory. The major factors influencing the real money demand are m to the power d is equals to f bracket y comma r comma lambda comma pi to the power e bracket close. A. Real income given as y. As real income increases, demand for money increases, which reduces the pressure on inflation caused by rising money supply. B. Interest rate given as r. Interest rate is the cost of holding money. As interest rate rises, people demand less balances, which lowers the inflation for any given nominal money supply. C. Financial innovations and institutional changes given by lambda. Financial innovations such as introduction of credit cards lowered the demand for real balances and therefore puts an upward pressure on the price level. D is the expectation of the future inflation given by pi to the power e. Now, if people expect inflation to rise in future, they prefer to hold less money at present as its value is expected to erode. This results in inflation making inflationary expectation self-fulfilling. Budget deficit and inflation. Fiscal deficit is financed by borrowing from the central bank, which is akin to printing money. This expands the aggregate money supply in the economy and causes a shift in the aggregate demand and a corresponding increase in the price level. A temporary budget deficit financed by money creation leads to a one-time shift in AD, which results in one-time shift in the price level and need not cause inflation. If, however, there is a persistent increase in deficit, it leads to a steady growth in the stock of money and a sustained increase in inflation. The preceding explanation rests on the notion that economy operates at full capacity. If, however, we assume that economy is working below full employment, an increase in money supply and the corresponding shift in AD will result in an increase in the level of output as well as prices depending on the shape of the AS. The objective of price stability. Inflation causes economic distress among people, especially the poor. Therefore, one of the important objectives of any government is achieving price stability. The following initiatives may go a long way in curbing inflation. A. Reducing inflationary expectations. While discussing the Phillips curve, we have learned that there is a one-on-one relationship between expected inflation and actual inflation. If workers expect inflation to rise in future, they demand higher wages as they do not want a reduction in their real wages. Since wages are built into prices, this naturally leads to higher inflation. In order to achieve low inflation, the central bank must make credible policy announcements so that people believe that the government is committed to lowering the inflation. This will make them lower their expectation of inflation and consequently actual inflation will fall. This requires that the central bank be made autonomous so that political interference can be eliminated. B. Using tools of monetary policy. The central bank can lower the money supply by increasing the CRR, SLR and bank rate. This will reduce AD and cause a reduction in price level. Such a measure will be effective if inflation is of the demand pull variety, that is, inflation is caused due to shift of AD and cost push factors have no role. Next is, should central bank do little? The new classical believe that policymakers should restrain themselves from using activist policy as it would lead to undesirable result. In other words, policymakers should refrain from using monetary policy when the economy is at long run equilibrium. The central bank should announce a simple money growth plan and stick to it so that people can predict the rate of inflation and not be surprised by unforeseen or unpredictable policy announcements. The following example will make matters clear. We refer to the Phillips curve equation used in section 3.1, which was given as pi t is equals to pi t to the power e minus alpha into ut minus un. This equation shows that when unemployment is lower than the expected, then inflation is higher than expected. The coefficient alpha shows the effect of unemployment on inflation given the expected inflation. Let the value of alpha be equals to 1. Now suppose policymaker aims to keep inflation 0 and follows a monetary policy that is consistent with it, then pi t to the power e is equals to 0 and ut is equals to un. Now if the policy makers deviate from announced policy and is tempted to reduce the unemployment below the natural rate by 1%, then he would increase the money supply so that the actual inflation will be 1%. That is 1% equals to 0 minus 1 bracket 5% minus 6% bracket close. Seeing the actual inflation to be 1%, workers will increase their expectation of inflation by 1%. If the policy maker is committed to keep unemployment below the natural rate, he would increase the money supply further so that 2% equals to 1% minus 1 into 5% minus 6%. As actual inflation is now higher than expected inflation, workers will revise their expectation of inflation to 2%, which will lead to even higher inflation in the next period. 3% is equals to 2% minus 1 into 5% minus 6%. The policy makers' eagerness to reduce unemployment below the natural level leads to a spiraling of inflation and calls for a restraint on activist policy. Whether to choose low inflation or low unemployment is more often than not a political question. Political parties which are conservative prefers to keep inflation low, whereas parties which are more liberal try to keep unemployment low. Therefore, it is argued that the central bank should be made autonomous and should be insulated from any political pressure. Since the impact of policies can be long term, it is required that the central bank chiefs should get a long tenure in office. Next, should central banks do more? The new Keynesian favor an activist policy as they believe that the economy tends towards underemployment when imperfectly competitive firms restrict the output by keeping the prices high. In figure 3, the imperfectly competitive firm keeps the price level at P, which causes the output to fall below Yn. Point A in the figure indicates underemployment. They also believe that the prices are sticky, so the economy will not adjust to the long run equilibrium instantly. Therefore, there is a room to expand output by increasing the money supply, which will shift the AD and economy will move from point A to point B. The central bank should stand ready to offset any recession caused by a sudden fall in aggregate demand by expanding the money supply. This implies that central bank should keep monetary policy flexible rather than keeping it constant. An activist monetary policy is desirable as it prevents the business cycles. During times of recession, money supply should be increased, and during booms, money supply should be reduced. Thus, monetary policy should be designed to meet the need of the economy. Let us now summarize what we have done in this module. In this unit, we have learned the following. A. The trade-off between inflation and unemployment holds only in the short run. B. The long run Phillips curve is vertical at the natural rate of unemployment. This arises because in the long run, actual inflation and expected inflation are equal. C. Money is neutral in the long run. That is, an increase in money supply increases the price level without affecting the level of output. D. The quantity theory of money also shows that money is neutral, as a doubling of money supply leads to a doubling of the price level. It holds even in the short run when output is fixed due to fixed factors of production. E. According to Friedman and other monetarists, inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. F. Persistent budget deficit financed through monetization can be inflationary if the economy is operating at full capacity. G. The monetarist prescription to reduce the inflation requires that the central bank cut the supply of money by using monetary policy tools such as bank rates and reserve ratios. H. There are two views regarding the role of central bank. The new classical propose that central banks should be conservative and keep the growth of money supply constant. However, the new Keynesian advocate a more activist role so that the monetary policy is kept flexible to suit the need of an economy.